Misfits. Midtown. Misfits. Midtown. Misfits. Midtown. Misfits.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome back, Misfits, and welcome back to a new episode. Today, we're doing something that we haven't done in a while.
Yeah, I was trying to think if we've done it, but I think we have, but it's been a very long time.
Yes. So today, we're starting not a series, not a Misfit conversation, not a singleton, but we're doing a duo.
A duo.
Yeah, a duo. For those of you who don't remember or haven't been here for a very long time, a duo is just an episode duet where it's just going to be 2 episodes.
Just like it sounds.
Yeah, it's actually two different topics, 2 episodes, and then we're going to move on to whatever's next.
Yeah. So it's like a mini series, but not really.
Yeah. Like a what is it called? Like a series made for TV.
Yeah, it's limited. It's a limited series.
Yeah, it's a limited run. But yeah, we're doing a duo, and we're doing a 2-part episode.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the known passages where Jesus compares believers to salt and light. This episode that we're doing today, which is duo number 1, which doesn't even make any sense, but we're going to talk about salt today, and then next week we're going to be talking about light.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, to hear what we have to say. Now that you know, because we don't always know what's coming, but hey, now you know what's coming.
Yeah, now you know. We're giving you a little sneak peek to what's to come, even though it's just 1 episode more, but now you know.
Yeah, now you know. But yeah, so we're just going to get into it. So these verses of salt and light and such, they're a part of what is known as Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And this sermon is one of Jesus' most well-known teachings.
Yeah.
He delivered it 2,000 years ago, and the speech is still making waves today.
That's right. We're still talking about
it. Yeah, we hear it referenced constantly, like the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount. And he spoke a lot. It was a lot of teachings, but this one gets referred to a ton.
And I think because there's just so much in it, like so many different parts in it, that you can really break it down anyway. So like if we wanted to do like Sermon on the Mount series, this could be like 20 episodes because there's just so much.
We'd be here. Wow. Yeah.
But we decided to just kind of take a little snippet, and talk about that. But who knows, we love to revisit things. So we may come back and be like, you know what, this is actually a series.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot.
Yeah, this can be part of the series that we've already done.
Part
so we don't have to do it
of
later.
The series.
Yes, exactly. And we'll continue to refer to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, this is a part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And in this sermon, Jesus gives us a lot of information that we see recorded in Matthew chapter 5. And the verses that we're focusing on today specifically is going to be verse 13. And it goes like this, and this is an NLT. The Bible says, "You are the salt of the earth, but what is salt if it has lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless."
Yeah.
That's our key verse.
Yeah.
This is my pastoral statement. That's our key verse. Oh, man. But before we get into the verse, we have to talk about the context of the chapter. We have to get you the teachiness and the backgroundness before we get into...
Yeah, the scenario.
Yeah, we have to. So in this scenario, Jesus is talking to a lot of people. Some know who he is and some don't.
Right.
Chapter starts by telling us that a crowd gathered and then Jesus went up the mountain. His disciples gathered around him and he began to teach them. So... at face value, this tells us that he is only teaching those who believe and those who were already following him, which are his disciples. However, there is speculation and controversy when talking about this verse because it's not clear if the multitudes that were there also followed him up the mountain as well. And then in that case, he would have a mix of believers and unbelievers. It's just not very explicitly stated because the way that I read it, and of course this is going to depend on the version and on your brain and who you are, but the way that I read it, it seems like it was just him and the disciples. But as we're researching, right, and trying to prepare for this episode, you see that it's like, oh, Jesus was talking to multitudes, and it's like, oh, some people think that there was more people there.
Yeah.
So regardless, he was talking to people, and even amongst the disciples, they had their times of belief and unbelief. So we don't even have to get into that.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, he shares, and he, meaning Jesus, what are known as the Beatitudes, which is a very fancy word for blessedness or supreme blessedness. So essentially, Jesus was sharing all the ways that we would be blessed, but there were certain responsibilities we had or have have to receive these blessings. Like there's some things that we have to do in order to receive these blessings from God.
Right.
We talk about this all the time, but our relationship with God is a partnership, and we cannot expect God to do everything.
Right.
And proof of that is that we don't see Jesus healing people that didn't take the step of faith.
Right.
We don't see Jesus, like the only people that he healed that I could remember off the top of my head that didn't do anything were the people that were dead.
Yeah.
And people did things on their behalf.
I was gonna say, I was like, the person didn't do it, but like someone did on their behalf.
Right.
So there was still action being taken.
Yeah, you have to be able to do something.
It's a step of faith.
Exactly. It's just not how he has the system set up to where he just does everything all the time. So anyway, once Jesus finishes the blessings, right? We're going through the chapter. Once he finishes the blessings, he continues teaching about other matters that are seemingly not connected, but as is the Bible, we know that they definitely are. And the premise here is if we don't learn how to partner with God and do the things that set us apart as his followers, then we cannot be salt of the earth. Mm-hmm. That is kind of the things that, like, as the Beatitudes, because this is chapter 5.
Yeah.
He starts with the Beatitudes, and then it just goes into this whole salt portion. And when you look at it at face value, you're like, why this isn't making any sense to me. So I'm blessed, but now I'm salt. I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
But the premise is like, okay, there's all these blessings that I have for you, but you have to, those who cry out will be comforted, but you have to cry out, right? Those who mourn.
Yes, yeah.
And then, like the meek will inherit the earth, but if you ain't meek, you can't inherit the earth.
Yes.
There's these parallels, and then all of a sudden he calls us salt, but what he's talking about is just being set apart, and then the things that we do as believers that then make us salt.
Yeah.
So having said that, why are we called salt? So let's start with defining the phrase. So according to dictionary.com, salt of the earth means, quote, an individual or group considered as representative of the best or noblest elements of society. Which sounds delightful.
Yeah, sounds great.
I don't mind being salt of the earth. According to the dictionary, that sounds great.
Yeah, no, you can call me salt. That's fine.
Yeah. So in the time of Jesus, one of the main uses for salt was to preserve. And this would mainly be meats and things that easily spoiled.
Yes.
Because they didn't have refrigeration.
Yeah.
And so salt was used to preserve. So that was one of the uses. One of the second uses of salt was to add flavor, which we know that one well because we'd use it today.
Yes, that one is still used. I mean, we still use the first one, but not as much because we have a refrigerator. I don't know.
Exactly. I can't speak about it personally.
Yeah.
But I'm sure someone does.
But I think for the majority of us, we can relate a lot more to the second one.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then we also learned that in Jesus' time, salt was considered precious.
Yeah.
And during his day, salt was a very highly valued commodity, and Roman soldiers were sometimes paid with salt. And this gave rise to the phrase, this person is, quote, worth his salt. It was literally used as like
currency or
currency. Yeah, that's huge. That's a lot. It's a lot of value.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, don't give me shekels, give me salt.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can compare it to what's, what valuable now. You can say like gold or something. And it's interesting that that's kind of where the phrase came from. Like I've heard the phrase, but I don't think I'd associate it before.
I've never heard the phrase, so you're ahead of me in this one because I've never heard that in my life.
No, I've heard it before, but I didn't know it meant because salt used to be very, precious. But now it kind of makes me feel better, 'cause, like it carries more weight in this verse. So anyway, but yeah, so for us as Christians, when we talk about preserve, for us, it's about preserving the gospel. We have been entrusted, right? We are responsible. It's part of our responsibilities as Christians that we want to preserve the gospel as truth. We know something, as I was reading this, I was like, there's so many people who's like their own truth, right? And there's so much alteration to what quote unquote truth is that when I read this, I was like, yes, that's why it's important for us to preserve the gospel of truth, because like we can't allow like people to try to change it. It has to stay true to what it is, to what he came and gave us. So,
and that's a big thing now. Like, this is my truth.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. That's the demonic agenda.
Right.
If you have your truth, I have my truth, Yadi has her truth, then we have to allow and be okay with what everyone is doing because there's no real foundation of truth. And it's just a plot, really.
Yeah. And then if everyone has their own truth, then you've lost the meaning of truth, really, right? And we know like that meaning hasn't hasn't been lost. There is a truth.
Yeah, like it hasn't changed.
Yeah, it hasn't changed, but as humans, sometimes we try to. So yeah, we have to be careful not to alter it or try to mold it to, again, like our life or our wants, which is, I think, what a lot of the world does. I know I've been, guilty of wanting to like mold it a little to what I want, and really that's not truth, right? Our desire is to preserve it as God intended it, and that way we're all on the same understanding or the same level, right? Like God's not trying to like, okay, you're okay with this truth, but for her it's going to be a different truth. Like, no, we're all on the same truth, and it must remain unchanged, just as God is unchanged, right? Like he said he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So that's his truth. It must be preserved. It's the same. And here we're talking about, purity, like the example of preserving meat. We need to slow down the decay and to essentially keep it fresh longer. And this is what we do when it comes to the gospel. When we share it, like we continue to share how essential it is to our lives and how relevant it is. We have to keep it fresh. And that doesn't mean we're changing it. We're just like, it's staying renewed in our minds, right? It's staying renewed. We're constantly like going back to what is truth, to the word of God, and knowing that we can share that and it's unchanged, like it's staying relevant in our lives but not changing. So it's still the good news, and not to be punny, but it slows decay, because through faith in Jesus and his good news, we have everlasting life.
We do. It's like when you were talking about it, it just made me think about like resalting, like we're constantly resalting ourselves.
Yeah.
Because another thing that salt was used for, if I'm not mistaken, was to like do laundry, because it purifies.
Yes.
And of course they didn't have washing machines, and they did everything at like a lake or a creek or whatever.
Yeah.
And they use salt and maybe some other mixtures or whatever, but it purifies and it cleans. And so that's what the word does. That's what reading the Bible and worshiping and praying, it just continues to like renew our mind daily, so we can stay fresh.
Yes.
And then we can share the fresh news also.
Yeah. It makes us fresh as well.
Literally.
Right.
So fresh and so clean.
It helps us from decaying in this world, if you will, which is, that's great. We really need it, because this world will pass away and we need to be preserved in Jesus, So kind of to your point, like the whole goal of salt is to make anything it touches better. And that's the peril, and that's what we should be doing too. Like we want to be able to make things better. Like, so we want to do that with our own lives and with others. So everywhere we go, everyone we meet should be left better after coming in contact with us. Now, don't get us wrong. We know that hasn't always been the case. Like we're not always, going to be influencing everyone for the positive. We've had our lives before, and we still have our ups and downs.
Yeah, like we've all looked at our past, and even when we were preparing for this episode, I was like, ooh, I feel like I haven't done that consistently.
Yeah.
But again, just confessing and repenting and being like, God, I don't like how I treated that person, who I was at that time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that again. And as you renew your mind and get closer to him, you really don't treat people like that anymore.
Yeah.
But this is like if you haven't been doing this, you can start today.
Yes.
And if you have been doing this, then you can definitely look back at who you were and know that you weren't doing this before, but you are doing this from now on.
Yeah. And even like we said, like we all have our ups and downs. So there's going to be some days where you're talking to someone, or you decide not to talk to someone, and you didn't come off the best way. Again, there's repentance, there's confession. That's why we do it. That's why we're renewed daily, right? So don't let a bad experience make you feel like you're not the salt. You are. We just need to bounce back from that.
Yes.
So of course, ultimately though, like our goal is always to impact. In addition to the Gospels, we also see salt mentioned in Colossians 4:6, and this is a New King James Version. And the Apostle Paul says, "Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one." There's other versions of the Bible, they say grace, and another, like the NLT, says gracious and attractive. But all in all, Paul is letting us know that our presence and our words are important. So what we say is meant to be valuable and helpful, and we are meant to be wise of every opportunity we have, whether that's speaking to believers or non-believers. We have to be able to know that our speech, our conversation, what we're sharing, we're saying it with love, right? We're saying it from a place that where God has placed that in our heart, and we're sharing that with other people. Love is the first fruit of the Spirit, and we also know that God is love. And Jesus tells us in John 13:35, your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. So this love applies to how we treat everyone, especially when it comes to unbelievers. So we're hopeful that, by seeing the love that we have towards each other, towards Jesus, that it will draw them also to Jesus and want to know, like, what is this love? Why are y'all always like loving on people and like being so positive and all this stuff? Like, we want to show that love of God in what we do and be able to be that for other people, right? Like attract that and be able to show the gospel as we live our life.
Yeah, even to set us apart from like other Christians, right?
Yeah.
Because there's people that identify as Christians and unfortunately they're just full with hate and unforgiveness and
judgment.
Yeah, judgment. And they're piggybacking off our last episode, but they're the ones throwing the first stone.
Yeah.
And Jesus tells us that that's not how they're going to know, right? They're not going to know because you're the loudest or you're holding the biggest sign or you're cursing out people that are in the LGBT community or like whatever. It's because of how you love people. That's how they'll know.
Yeah.
And the love sets you apart just like the salt sets you apart.
Right.
Like, why are you different? Like, why, like, all the other Christian people I know won't talk to me or won't do this or won't do that or just be different. They'll know that it's that you were sent, and then that'll be attractive to them, and they're like, man, why do you live the way that you live or whatever, and it'll draw them hopefully just to be saved and to know more and all of these things. But it's all about being set apart for sure.
Yeah. And going back to like the salt like adds flavor, like that's the difference, right? Like, what is it that you're bringing that's different? Like when you eat a meal and you're eating one and it's like, oh, this one's like, I can take it or leave it. It doesn't matter. It's not very good. But then you get one that has a lot of flavor and you're like, oh, I want more of this. And so it calls your attention. So the same way, like there has to be something that sets us apart, and that's the love, right? That's the love of God that's going to attract people and be like, there's something different about that girl or, that group of people that, they don't talk to me or they don't act the way that I think quote unquote religious people do or something. And that's because we're showing that we are the salt. Like God has called us salt, and that love that he's put in us, like that's what we're showing, and that's what's attracting people, and people want to know more. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that, right?
That was a great example.
So to close, we want to talk about how the Bible tells us many things about our words. The two key things that stand out are from Luke 6:45, and it says, what you say flows from what is in your heart. And then we see in Proverbs 18:21, it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Again, this emphasizes how our words matter, and we need to be careful what we say. In addition, what we put in will come out. So what we watch, listen to, read, that's going to come out eventually. And I think that's why it's important. Like, that's why God's calling us to preserve the truth. Like, how can we do that? And I think it comes back to that. Like, what's the truth? What are we depositing in our hearts? What are we surrounding ourselves with, right? Like we just talked about the other week about music. Like, that's important. Like, what are we listening to? Is that impacting us? So like what we see, what we read, all that is what's deposited and what we're going to then put out.
Yeah. I think there's a misconception that it's like, oh, you're saved and then you're automatically salt. Work at it. It's not, you're not automatically just saved and then you just become all of these things that the Bible talks about. What happens is, like you said, you were talking about what we're ingesting, whether through our mouths, through our eyes, or through our ears. Everything that we input makes us salt.
Yes.
Because that's what makes us different. No, I don't listen to that. No, I don't go to those places. No, I don't believe in that. No, I don't use those words. Like everything that you input comes out, and it actually sets you apart from the world because you're ingesting things that don't look like what the world is ingesting.
Yeah. And also you're ingesting the things that are like, yes, I do pray. Yes, I do read my Bible. Yes, I do go to church, right? Like, yes, I am in community. Yes, I do, call a friend when I'm, hey, I'm going through something. Can you pray for me? Like, we're also putting that in ourselves because we want that to then come out, right? Like, if I'm not reading his word, then that's not going to come out when I'm talking to someone or when I'm praying for someone. So we want to be able to to do that too. Like, yes, we're purifying and we're taking out stuff that doesn't serve us anymore. It's not like it's going to help us in our walk, but we're also putting all the good stuff in, you know?
Yeah, all the good stuff that you put in is what's preserving you,
Yes.
which then makes you salt, which then helps you preserve not only the gospel, but then those around you, and then share your saltiness with them.
Yes.
But that's what sets you apart. That's what sets you apart. If you're doing everything that everybody in the world is doing, you're not going to be set apart. You're just going to look like everybody else. Right. At that point, you're not salt. I don't know what you would be, but you're not salt.
You're a little bland. Let's get some flavor in you.
It's yeah. You need a little adobo. But yeah, that's salt. That's salt. That's what God says. That's what Jesus says. Not God, Jesus specifically, about salt in Matthew 5. And that's what we wanted to talk about today. Now, of course, like every topic, because we can't end an episode without saying it, but there's so much more to each and every topic that we talk about.
Yeah.
This is just what we wanted to focus on, because I think this is something like a lot of things that we talk about that people say, but then they don't explain.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, I feel like you hear that a lot. I mean, I even have a shirt that says, like, be salt or you're salty or something, which of course kind of like a play on words. But like you hear it, you see it, it's often paired with, salt and light, which is why we're going to talk about light next time. But you hear it, and if you're kind of new or haven't really delved into it, you're like, well, why am I salt? Like, that makes no sense. So I hope we were able to like bring a little clarity to that, because I think it can be like a very like Christian phrase you throw around.
It can be Christianese.
It can be very Christianese. But there's actually like a very important message behind it, and there's reason why Jesus said it,
Yeah, so we hope this helped clarify some things.
Yeah.
And again, we'll be back next week and we'll talk about light, the other thing that we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hope that this helped you. And as always, this is Fran.
This is Yadi.
We are the Midtown Misfits, and we will see you next week. Bye.